Pennsylvania. Senator Pat Toomey. Senator Toomey, we were talking earlier about the problems in Greece, Italy, Spain, soon to be France possibly, and a lot of other Western countries, and how that's going to impact us here. Of course, we can look at California to look at the depth of debt crisis in this country. Let me just ask you this question. If you had to decide today on an up or down vote on Simpson Bowles, let's say the president played against type and said, I will support Simpson Bowles, and it's put on the floor for a vote up or down, would you vote for it?
Probably not, Joe.
Why not?
And keep in mind also that Simpson Bowles is more of an idea than it is a piece of legislation. There's an awful lot that is left unspecified, and you have to make those decisions to turn something into legislation. Now, having said that, you may recall from the super committee, I did put a framework on the table that included a real statically scored revenue increase. It included the tax reform of the nature that Simpson Bowles recommended. It included a ratio of spending cuts to new revenue that was very comparable to Simpson Bowles. So, you know, I think I've demonstrated I've been willing to go way outside of my comfort zone to try to reach an agreement that would make some progress on this.
So Pat, you are not one of those Republicans who at the debate refused to raise their hands when they were asked if they got $10 of spending cuts for every $1 of tax revenue increases, would they support that? You would support what, a 5 to 1 ratio?
Joe, it depends on how you cut spending, because not all spending cuts are equal. Let's face the reality here. The simple reality is we need to restructure the big entitlement programs. It's as simple as that.
Right.
If we're willing to do that, then even though I don't think we should have to pay a price in terms of higher taxes structurally, I'd be willing, if it was in the context of pro-growth tax reform that lowered marginal rates and we generated the additional revenue by reducing deductions and loopholes and write-offs and that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, so that's really where I am, Steve Schmidt, that don't talk to me about new revenues until you come forward with a plan that's going to save Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid over the next 30 years, 40 years. If Democrats are willing to do that, I'm willing to talk about anything. But until that's put on the table, don't waste my time. And I think that's where most Republicans are.
Yeah, no doubt. And to get the out-of-control spending under control, to stop a lot of the waste, to reform a lot of the broken institutions of government. We were talking about California, and this is the case of California. More taxes, higher taxes, but absolutely no reform to any of the broken spending programs, any of the structural problems in the state.
Yeah.
Hey, Senator Toomey, you know, my instinct would be that if you went to Altoona, Pennsylvania, and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and took the biggest business person out of both those cities and said, listen, could you fix Social Security? Give me some ideas on how to fix Social Security. Between the two of them, it would take them maybe 10 minutes to come up with ideas to fix Social Security, like raise the retirement age, means testing. So my question to you is, why does it take you people so long to get to common sense solutions?
Look, that's a very fair question, but I think you really need to drill down just one level below. And look what happens on the Senate floor today. You're going to see 3 different Republican budgets that comprehensively address the biggest problem our nation faces, this fiscal disaster. We have different approaches, but we all deal with the tax reform we need. Every one of them will deal with the entitlement reform that's necessary. You can argue about which is better or which works best, but there's not a single alternative coming from the other side. There is silence about what to do about there's not silence, actually, they just attack us, about the entitlements. There's no message about tax reform. My budget, for instance, I've taken some of the president's ideas. I think wealthy senior citizens should pay a little bit more for the Medicare benefits they get. Yeah, right. So in my budget, I've integrated the president's recommendation on increasing means testing. You know, Ron Wyden, to his credit, has embraced the plan for reforming Medicare so that Medicare can be sustainable. We've put that into my budget. We're going to have a big discussion about this, and you've got multiple Republican plans that address this fundamental problem. I think several of them will have broad support within the Republican conference, and we get nothing from the other side. That's just not reasonable.
Okay, so we have a Republican making a charge about Democrats in the Senate. I'm a Republican. And from everything I've seen, what he said about Senate Democrats is absolutely true. But I want to be fair. I want to put this on the table right now. Does anybody have any evidence that Harry Reid's Democratic Senate has put any plan on the table over the past 2 years to address the biggest fiscal issues. Donnie?
I don't see it. What I know the answer.
No,
is,
I want to be fair here, but a lot of times people make charges and there's another side to the story.
Right.
I think in this case, more Zuckerman, there is no other side in the story. The Democrats have decided in the midst of a financial meltdown, they're going to do absolutely nothing so they can attack the other side.
Right, I mean,
and we beat the hell out of Republicans every day.
Right.
That's why I'm drawing out this point.
Yes.
Because they do have plans to save Social Security. They do have plans to save Medicare. They do have plans to pay down the debt and the deficit. But this president and this Democratic Senate is offering absolutely nothing in return. Nothing.
Well, what's happened, of course, given our system, particularly where you have a Democratic president, you have to have leadership from the presidency, and I think it all starts with the presidency. There is no leadership from the president on the fiscal issues. He's just walked away from it. He walked away from Simpson Bowles. You listen to Simpson and Bowles now talk about it. As Simpson said, he asked us to put together the plan. We put together the plan that he asked us. We got the majority within the Simpson Bowles Commission to do it, and it was abandoned. So, of course, everybody else is going to abandon it on the Democratic side, because he is the leader of the party.
Joe, let me pick up on that. Of course, I agree with you, but on the flip side, on the Republicans, what was so refreshing, what Senator Toomey just said, is I actually heard out of his mouth that rich guys should pay a little more.
Right.
And by the way, so I'm going to criticize the Republicans, save Senator Toomey here, for also not taking some. I'm not seeing the plans for them, and I'm not seeing.
Well, they're on the floor today.
Okay.
3 plans today, and Pat. Republicans and Paul Ryan has been putting out plans for 3 years, waiting for Democrats to respond with their version of where America should go, and we're getting nothing from the Democratic side. What are you hearing on the Hill? Why are the Democrats refusing? Because we know that the Democratic Senate budget chairman, he's a great man, and he's a fiscal hawk. But what's going on?
Kent Conrad wanted to do a budget. He said so many times. And then he said, we're going to do a budget, at least in committee. If Senator Reid won't allow us to take it to the floor, at least we'll do it in my committee. Well, I wasn't in the closed-door meeting that happened in his caucus, but he came out of that sufficiently shaken that he had to change his mind and say, well, we can't do a markup after all. We'll all sit around the table and everyone can have 5 minutes to say whatever they like. There will be no amendments, no votes, nothing produced.
Senator, you're telling me that the Senate budget chairman said he was going to put a budget together and then was ordered to stand down and would only be allowed to let people talk about it?
All I can tell you is what happened between point A and point B. He started off saying he was going to produce a budget. Much to his credit, we Republicans embraced it. We said, let's mark one up, let's have a big old fight, and let's see if we can produce something. He said we will. And then the day before the markup was supposed to occur, he announced that this would be a unique markup. It would be one in which nothing gets marked up. There'd be no votes.
What are the defense cuts?
You can't make this
Senator,
up.
what are the defense cuts in the Republican budgets?
Well, what most of the Republican budget, well, they vary. So, for instance, Mike Lee is going to introduce a budget where that he worked out with Heritage, where they have a higher level of defense spending than my budget would have. Mine adopts the cuts that were enacted in the first round of the BCA, but does not include the sequestration that's scheduled to go into effect. I think Rand Paul takes a similar approach, but I'm not entirely sure. But the fact is, I don't think that the defense spending can be off the table. Mike, we've got to look at defense spending as well as everything else.
Until defense and entitlements, it's all, you know.
And then Senator Ken Conrad, after going through all of that frustration, as Senator Toomey just pointed out, said one other thing.
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I've had it with this process. I quit.
It's unbelievable. And
so he's leaving.
You know what? I think the great question would be, Donnie, what's the Democratic plan to cut defense spending?
Right.
What's the Democratic plan to save Social Security? Because we know the Republican plans, they're out there. If you don't like them, then come up with your own plan and let us know what it is, and we can have a fair and open debate. Americans can see what the Democratic vision is.
By the way, we all agree that 80% is defense and entitlements, and in the Republican plan, has there been sufficient cut?
Wait,
Donnie,
Donnie,
I don't think it's a viable plan.
Donnie,
You can have a plan, but if it's not viable.
Don't gloss over it. Listen, If the Democrats will put a budget out there, we can meet in the middle. And there will be Republicans like myself, Republicans like George Will, Republicans like Steve Schmidt that say, hey, let's cut even more. Let's get our troops home from Afghanistan. Instead of rebuilding Afghanistan, let's rebuild schools in America. Let's invest in R&D in America. Let's invest in infrastructure in America and take care of the long-term debt. There is a group of Republicans who are fiscal hawks and defense hawks. But this conversation never begins, Mort, because Democrats won't put a budget on the floor.
You know, we have as I keep on repeating this, we have a system of government that just works with presidential leadership. The Congress, by and large, unless you have a very unique leadership, often cannot do it. And right now, everything is paralyzed in the Congress. Yeah. What we needed was leadership from the presidency. That's why Simpson Bowles was so important. Yeah. And it was abandoned. It was ignored. That was the great fault.
All right, Senator Pat Toomey, thank you so much for being with us. It's always great to see you. Mort, stay with us. Still ahead, House Budget Chairman, Committee Chairman Paul